So, this edition of Feminist Friday, I'm speaking to a friend of mine, Laryssa Vachon, and I wanted to introduce this, just us, and say that this is a bit of a trigger warning. That if you have trauma, whether it's that you've been sexually assaulted or you have sexual experience where you didn't feel autonomous and it's unresolved, that some of the content here may hit a wound for you, may hit a soft spot. So I want you to know. I really took a risk in this episode in that I told stories about myself that I've never really told on a broader scale. And, you know, my thing is that I want people to know, women to know, that you're not alone in your story, and that if you have been through the same thing, you know, it isn't your fault, and that maybe, you know, we can bind together and find community in that and find comfort in that. I did edit out a few things that maybe in the future I'll share as well, but I find that until you have kind of healed those wounds a little bit, while there's just kind of a scab over them, it maybe isn't as wise to put them up in the public forum, especially on YouTube, where, you know, the bots and the trolls abound. I don't want to leave myself vulnerable to my trauma vulnerable in a way that is going to be actually really hurtful for me in the long run. But I do think it is worthwhile to tell the stories that are hard to tell, for the sake of the people who have the same story but feel really alone in it. Anyway, I enjoy Feminist Friday. Laryssa is amazing, and her research about people who grow up in the church and how they interact with their sexuality is really fascinating. So today, Feminist Friday and Church on Sunday will both be with Laryssa. So yeah, enjoy. Okay, hello everybody. So this is a very special edition of Feminist Friday with Laryssa Vachon. So we have known each other since you were what, 16?
16, yeah.
So 9 years. I used to teach her voice lessons. You just finished her master's degree. In what was your master's degree in?
So my master's degree was in journalism. For my research project, I chose to talk about Christianity and issues of sex and sexuality within that. And so I talked a lot about purity culture and just how like sex is taught within Protestant Christianity specifically.
Oof, barf. Yeah. So barf. It's so triggering for me because if you've watched any of this content previously, you know, I grew up in a fundamentalist evangelical home, which makes me a little gaggy. But so when I heard this, because it's taken me such a long time to deconstruct the shame and the guilt around my own sexuality, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to interview you, just so that I feel like you have so much information that is so useful.
I have a lot, yeah.
So I guess when I think about it from my own point of view, I'm 36, thank you. It's taken me until now to kind of deconstruct all of the shame and the bullshit and be able to kind of own my sexuality. But even now, I have a little tinge of guilt, or I have a little, it's still there now. It's taken a long time. So is that kind of what you were talking about with all of these people that you interviewed, is deconstructionism and that kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, well, that was my original goal, was to kind of go into it and talk to people about how they were taught about sex and sexuality within their religion affects who they are now. Yeah. And some of them were my friends, so we got really into it. I had one friend where we went out for drinks and talked about it, so we got a lot of good stuff. And then some people who I wasn't as close with, or who were a bit older, struggled a bit to talk about their own relationship.
That makes sense, because I'm an oversharer. I will share everything, I don't care. But I like that. So that's the thing though, is that I know that a lot of people in my generation, some of whom did get married at 12 and have 14 kids, you know, they're not talking about their sex life. It is very private. And I know for me, I share because it took such a long time to let it go. And because I feel like my relationship with my dad, but the patriarchy in general in the church has made me so, I was so groomed to please, that my own pleasure and my own kind of enjoyment was almost if you enjoy it and if you do it out of pleasure as a woman, then you're a whore. Or then you've lost some kind of piety and holiness. Did you have those kind of conversations as well?
Yeah, well, a lot of it actually came from my own like similar relationship like with sex and my religion. And so a lot of the women I talked to felt the same. And then a lot, like some of the men I interviewed were also like openly gay in the church. And so listening to them talk about it too was really heartbreaking actually.
Yeah, it was horrible. Well, it's hard because I know for myself, I remember when I lost my virginity in Korea, I was 24. Thank you. A year younger than you now. I was 24 when I lost my virginity. I actually even had a chastity ring, so I no longer have that. So I lost it, and I remember feeling like, oh no, like I can't have a relationship with God now. That's it. Like the roads have converged? No, diverged. Thank you. Hello, my degree's in opera, not journalism. So
I wouldn't have known the difference.
Thank you. Pretty good. So basically, I remember feeling like I can only have sex or spirituality. And I know a lot of my gay friends felt exactly the same way. Like I can't be in a gay relationship because of, going to hell and all of that jazz. So it's so hard because you're so repressed and feeling like you have to choose.
I think that with a bunch of people, actually, like a lot of them were saying that they felt like once they started having sex that they were somehow making their family ashamed of them. Yeah. And that's kind of how I felt. Not that like my family never made me feel like super ashamed of it, but they'd be like, oh, like I wish that it didn't happen, like you didn't lose your virginity this way, like I wish that this happened instead. And then I went to a small school and everyone knows about everything that happens. When people like had heard about what happened or they know people who have sex, they like hear you go to church, and then they don't think that you belong there. Yeah. And so like I would still go to church every Sunday and I would be part of this community, but because people knew that I had sex before, they were like, like what are you doing here? Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because it's almost like women in the church, your sexuality is open season. It's everybody's business, right? I can have an opinion about you and your sexuality. I feel like for guys it's not nearly as bad, but for us, because we are either the Madonna or the whore in every biblical story, there really is no middle ground. And so everybody feels like because my sexuality belongs to my dad and Jesus, and then my husband, that basically it's like, as soon as you lose your virginity, the community has a meeting about it, right? And you're like, actually, it's my body, but that's such a new concept. Yeah. Like, it's so interesting.
And one of the scary things that I actually, that really shocked me, so I interviewed these two researchers from Ontario, and their names are Heather Shipley and Pamela Dickey-Young. And they did research like all over Canada with youth, like asking them questions about their sexuality. And a lot of people said, even if they weren't religious, that they still felt guilty about having sex. So it's something that like has affected society, whether or not you grew up in the church, which is
kind of a Christian culture, right?
Right. Yeah. So that I thought that was really interesting because even if their parents aren't religious and even if they don't go to church or whatever, like they still feel this guilt about it.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah. Well, and I think I remember losing my virginity in Korea. Now, see, here's the funny thing. In Korea, I remember losing my virginity in Korea and then feeling the need to call my parents and be like, do you still love me? And it was a real question. It was a real question. Like I was crying. It was very traumatic. But yeah, I remember that feeling of like, I will not be loved anymore. I've lost my value somehow. Isn't that gross? Like how many goats can you get for your daughter? But that's a funny thing. So I even think like this in this moment, I'm like, oh, I hope my parents, what are they going to say when they see this? Shit, I don't want to deal with it. I'm 36. Yikes.
Do you know what's funny is that I'm thinking about that too. I'm like, how much do I want to share about myself? But then I'm okay being vulnerable. But then I'm like, oh, who's watching? Like, who's going to judge this still now?
I know. Like, the Puritans are in my head. Get out. Anyway, so, like, we're such, like, complicated like, our physiology is so complicated compared to, like, the dude, right? So, this is twice now. This is 3 times. This is very... Do it with your right hand. What's on this?
No, I do both.
She's like, that's not good. That's not good form. I'm saying, something to work on. Ambidextrous.
Yes, my hand game isn't it?
We'll work on it. So there's always something to learn. Anyway, so what I was saying is we're definitely not editing that out. We're keeping that because that is gold. Anyway, like we as women, it takes forever to figure out what you like. And if you've been raised in shame, it takes forever to say, I don't really like that. Like I'm not really into that. Because we're so raised in the church to not piss off the dude, to submit, right? And so for me, it's taken such a long time to know what I like, know how to get there, right? If I can, know how to get there. When we're with a partner, it just takes a long time to trust yourself enough and to trust somebody else enough to be able to ask for what you want and to get there. I don't know about you, but I find myself being like, well, this isn't gonna happen. Within the first like 2 minutes, I'm like, well, this isn't gonna happen. So what am I gonna, I should go get some sushi. What should I,
like, when is this over yet?
What time are they open until? What time is it? I can't look at the clock right now. Shit, what am I gonna do? Like that's literally what, because I go like, I know I'm not gonna get there. I don't wanna piss him off. Truthfully, like I feel like we know.
That's why communication is really important. Like if you're with a partner who doesn't want to communicate, it's kind of like,
because
I don't know why I'm here.
I just feel like it's a confidence issue, right? With these guys, it's like, you don't want to say anything because you're like, what if I scare the penis? And then this whole thing is done. It takes a lot of courage as women who grew up in the church and who still have so many family members and friends who really still observe all that stuff to be able to come out and be like, okay, here's the deal. There's definitely a lot of things that I'm revealing right now that I have never revealed before. And that's a little bit scary because you go, I'm definitely gonna get some judgment and people who don't really understand and who've made other decisions to like stay the course of like evangelicalism and puritanical culture. But I just want freedom, you know, and I think it's up to us as this generation comes up, even though we didn't have that conversation with our parents, to learn how to say, you know, sex is both physiological, as well as it can be, it's a spiritual, emotional thing. You know, it is something to make precious and to be careful with, but it's also just a physical thing. And to try to kind of strike a balance there instead of just like creating shame. But it's tough when you've never had that conversation yourself.
Well, one thing that I think that I always bring up, especially when I presented this research, that I was saying, like, if you're someone who does want to save themselves from marriage, like that's totally fine. Like I don't want to shame people who want to wait because that's what they're comfortable with. But if it comes from the idea that you're only waiting because you feel like God won't love you otherwise, then that's kind of where, like if you, I don't know, like I have some friends who were with partners for like years and years and years and they wanted to have sex but they didn't because they felt like, you know, like they wouldn't be accepted in religion. Right, and that's kind of where I have an issue with it because it's like they were in a loving relationship and they were like comfortable and they were committed to each other and they wanted to, but they were like, ooh, but God, even though there really isn't anything in the Bible that says
well, culturally speaking, it was, first of all, women were getting married as soon as they had their period, right? So like 15, you're married, so it's not like you're holding on to your virginity. It's like, oh no, now I have my period, so therefore I'm marriageable, therefore they get married. Secondly, a woman's worth was so tied in with her virginity, and as a culture, a lot of those rules were made because if you had a whole bunch of kids out of wedlock and a bunch of extra kids around, men were assholes. So they weren't sticking around for kids that they weren't actually tied to legally, right? So it would have really made a breakdown in their society if these women had gotten pregnant out of wedlock. So it was kind of a pragmatic rule back then, whereas it's turned into this way that the patriarchy can like hold on to us. I read a study once that said that men imprint on their first sexual experience. And what that means generally, in general terms, is that if you start out watching a ton of porn, then you may have a hard time kind of shifting into having sex with a partner. So I know guys that I went to Bible college with that got married and then couldn't, you know, pull the car into the garage and actually make anything happen physically for their new wife because they had either had so much shame about having an erection or they had so much shame about taking care of it themselves. The whole thing had so much emotional baggage around it that they couldn't perform to completion with their new wife. Now that they were in like the holy end zone, it's like they just couldn't do it. So I'm like, it's so brutal. And as women, I don't know, it's harder because I feel like we are much more complex, you know, plumbing. But at the same time, there's really not a lot of shame if you don't have an orgasm as a woman. Whereas if a guy, you can't get it up and you can't, you know, make it happen. There's so like,
I totally remember.
There's no ball game.
I remember what I was gonna say.
Tell me.
About how, so when I first started having sex, it like always felt like such a chore because I wasn't getting any pleasure from it. And the guys that I was with kind of always made me feel like there was something wrong with me because of that, because I didn't know, and because I'd never done it before. I didn't know like the rules. And I remember we were like, I mean, I mean, you know what to do, but then you also don't, like you still have to figure it out. But yeah, like guys would actually just make me feel so guilty for not being able to do that. And then they would like it. Yeah, I'm trying to explain it in a way that makes sense, but I've just like had partners that will just kind of give up and just get bored with me because that's not something that I was able to figure out with them. And then instead of being like patient and taking the time.
Well, I wonder if the psychology behind that isn't that they themselves feel a bit guilty and if they feel shame about the fact that they can't bring you there.
Yeah.
And so it's easier for them to kind of put that on you and be like, you can't do this, and shame you about it, than to actually reveal the fact that it makes them feel vulnerable that you can't do that, because it's their job to get you there in their mind, right? And if you are a small person who can't get there, doesn't have the emotional intelligence or the depth to be able to have that conversation, it's easier to say you're broken than for me to take like have that conversation, right? I just know the feeling of being in different situations. I was gonna say a lot of different situations, then I was like, nope. That's not true. Well, anyway. Not that it matters, but just in case you're watching, Mom, sorry about it.
I'm gonna send this to my dad.
I was like, hi, here's a link. Anyway, so I just know that like how many times I grew up with a dad that's very volatile, or that was very volatile for like the first 25 years of my life, no big deal. And so because of that married to the theology, the patriarchal theology of the church, which is don't piss a man off and let a man lead, and you are basically supposed to just be the supporting figure. How that manifests sexually for me is that when I started to be sexually active, which wasn't until I was 24, thank you, Jesus. You know, I remember.
I was like, yeah, me too. 24.
Yeah, 24. You're like, actually last weekend. Actually this morning.
Yeah, I learned all of this in a day.
Oh my gosh, you're so smart. You're like the Rain Man of sexuality and puritanism. Anyway, so I just remember feeling like I couldn't even ask. Now, precursor to the story, I have been tested, everything's great, everything's perfect. But I remember the first few years that I was dating, or that I was sexually active, I remember not even having the guts to ask the guy to put a condom on. Because I was like, I didn't want to do anything that was going to make him uncomfortable or make him mad.
Yeah. And
so like in that moment, he doesn't want to. And instead of insisting, like my first partner I was like, you know, we have to because I'm a virgin. But then from there, I was like, I don't, you know, it's really uncomfortable to ask for something and to create a boundary. And if you're raised not to create boundaries with men because of the patriarchy and maybe a strong father figure who is a bit of a jerk sometimes, it's like,
hashtag daddy
now
issue.
I really hope my dad's watching. It's like, how do you then have this shape-shifting moment while you're in this intimate setting where you're strong enough to say, oh no, my voice matters. Instead, so wonder why these chicks get pregnant. Because they don't know how to say no to men. They don't know how to say, oh no, put a condom on. Because they don't want to piss them off, and because it's like, if he has a condom at all, it's premeditated sin. So I don't know. It's taken a long
time. Is that really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's why these girls aren't on birth control.
Wow.
Is that they're like, if I'm on birth control, it means that I'm setting myself up to sin, which is premeditated, right? If these Christian boys have condoms, it's like I'm planning to sin. That's why Christian dummies get pregnant every 5 seconds, right? Hello. Live your best life. I don't know. I think we all have those stories. And as Me Too comes up as well, we all have those stories of times where the guy might not even realize that happened.
Yeah.
And it was a victimizing situation for us because we didn't say, yeah, I really don't want to do this. Yeah. You know?
Exactly. And the thing is that when that came out, I realized that like I've been in situations that definitely are not okay. But then I'm like, I can't fully blame them though because I never said anything. I was never like, no, I'm uncomfortable, or like, no, get off of me. I just kind of let it happen because I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so now that that's coming out, I hope that it like inspires people to be able to speak up.
Well, it's our training, right? It's your training. If you grew up in the church, that like who's speaking from the pulpit? Not a lady, right? who's meant to be the leader in the home? Not a lady. So when you're taught that the dude is meant to be the authority, and then you end up in that situation, it's really hard to then find your voice when there's some dude on top of you. More so, you think, this will take me a couple of weeks to get over. It'll only last about 5 or 10 minutes, and it'll be done. That's the math. I've done that math where I'm like, I'm gonna cry. Well, that took a turn. Yeah. Oof. But seriously, like, you're in it and you think, this will last maybe 15 minutes. And how long will it take for me to be done with, like, emotionally to get over it? Maybe a couple of weeks. And you think, I would rather deal with that myself. I would rather dig myself out of that trauma than in this moment say no and risk him being pissed off, him being upset, or maybe worse.
Yeah.
We've all been there. Like all of my friends who weren't virgins at marriage, you know, all of us have been in that situation where you make a decision at your own peril.
Yeah. In
order to just not rock the boat.
There have been times when I've like gone to the bathroom and just like cried after because I felt like such garbage.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm at this point now where like after I've done all this research and stuff, I can get over it in a way that like it used to make me feel shameful because of like religion and because of things that I was raised to believe. And so I think that's part of why I would cry about these things. But then it got to the point where I was like, if I enjoyed something and if it was my choice, I shouldn't be upset about it because it shouldn't make me feel like, it shouldn't make me feel like this. Like, one of my friends that I interviewed said that the church is like the last place you should feel like you have to hide every part of who you are.
Totally.
Yeah.
But for so many people, that's exactly what it is, right? It's exactly like, it's ridiculous. Like I have so many gay friends who are like reading every piece of literature, looking for a loophole so that they can still have their friends and their family and the place that felt like home for most of their life. And then also felt like the most painful place in the world for most of their life as well, right? Like it's this very complicated thing. And I just think, and I cry, that story, like those stories make me emotional, not because I'm still super traumatized by them, but because the woman that I am now mourns for the woman that I was then. You know, like when you really think that I'll just get over it, you know?
Yeah.
And you take it on yourself. When the guy, this actually went viral. I don't know, maybe you remember this guy. I met this guy, he lived in California, he was gonna move up here. This is like my first year in Vancouver. And he came for a weekend and he's like, hey, like, let's go out, blah, blah, blah. He was really cute. We had an okay time. He was a bit much, but he was staying in this hotel and he's like, here, just come back for a bit. So we we went back and like hung out. And then he's like, do you want a massage? And I was like, okay, but I'm not sleeping with you. Cause like, you don't even live here. And this is like, right.
It's like a free massage.
Yeah. And I was just like, but I also was like, but also I'm going to keep my clothes on. Like, and he's like, oh no, she's like, just take your shirt off. He's like, I can't really do it without whatever. I'm like, sure. Before I know it, I have like high-waisted skinny jeans on. Somehow this guy he's like wrenching on my jeans and I am like laying there in just like my underwear and he, like this may or may not get edited out, but he is like giving me massage and suddenly I feel his hot penis on my back. And in that moment, I'm like, what do I do? I'm in a hotel room with a guy who's on top of me already, and I have these high-waisted, tight-ass skinny jeans. How am I gonna get them back on in a way that's in any way, you know, time effective? Yeah. You know, so I'm like, am I gonna get up and be like, oh, try and find all my stuff and then like leave? It just felt impossible. And then he like turned me over and we ended up, and that was that situation that I was thinking of when I was thinking about how long is this gonna take for me to get over. Then I'm like, he's like, you come down to California now, come down for a weekend. I'm the kind of person where if I have shame about something, I want it to turn into something that's real so that I don't feel shame about it.
I know exactly how you feel. You are not alone in that.
Where you're like, if it's something real, then maybe I'm not, maybe this feeling I have
maybe that was just a bad first time. Like maybe he'll make up for it in another way. Yeah.
Totally, which is mortifying. Yeah. So he was supposed to fly me down and he's like, why don't you just pay for the flight? I was poor at this time. And he's like, well, actually, no, I'll pay for it. I'll pay for it. That's fine. The next day, I hadn't heard from him. Like, hey, like, where you been? He writes me this long message that actually I realized later actually went viral. You may have read this. I I ended up putting it up on Facebook and putting my reply on Facebook because he said, hey, I realize that we're not really compatible, in large part because of your skin issues, in brackets, cellulite. And then he goes on to like critique my body.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Anyway, traumatizing. So, yeah.
I cannot believe that happened.
Can you believe that?
What did you say back?
Oh yeah, no, it's still
Just a whole, I need to look at this. You need to like put it.
Yeah, maybe I'll like.
Oh my god, I'm
find
so
it.
sorry that happened.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like I wrote back and like kind of I let him have it, but that was kind of the first time that I really let somebody have it for. I mean, that was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah,
but it was like traumatizing. But yeah, like we all have those situations. Maybe not that dramatic in that way, but we all have those situations where like it's basically like a date rapey kind of a situation.
Yeah.
And then you go out with him again. And then because you think, oh no, maybe I misconstrued that. Maybe that's, I don't know. Why do we do that? It feels ridiculous when you say it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. I'm going over the times that I've done that in my life as well. And it's kind of, like when you put it that way, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous that we go back to those situations just because we want to try and make ourselves feel better about it.
Yeah.
And like hope that they'll make up for it somehow, or like, I don't know.
Yeah. When I was in Korea, I don't know whether he drugged me, what exactly happened.
God.
I was living in Korea by myself. What could I do? But anyway, I woke up with him, and then 10 days later had a little bit of spotting, and I was like Googling like a mad woman, and I was like, oh my gosh, the egg has been implanted. I am pregnant. Oh shit.
Don't let him do that shit.
I'm like, oh. I remember, have you had that like shock where like you can hear your heartbeat in your ears? And you're just like, this is it. But yeah, like so anyway, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. And I've never been anyone who's ever considered abortion. I was actually very pro-life up to that moment. And then I was like, oh no, I get it. Okay.
I get it.
Cool.
Yeah.
But I went out with him 2 more times.
Yeah.
2 more times. Because I thought, if I am pregnant, I can't know yet. If I am, I want to know this guy. I want him to have some kind of role here if I am. But like, I remember going on dates with him and being like, and looking at him across the table like, this is not the best. But like, you just think like, you have this clinical thought of like, if I am pregnant, or you have the shame and you think I need to build another narrative around this shame so that it doesn't feel so bad. It's crazy.
Yeah,
a lot of crazy shit has happened to me. It's amazing. I'm so well adjusted.
You don't have to post this, but was that like your first time? Was that your first experience?
No,
or was it with...
my first experience was with a guy that I had been dating for a bit. I had gone home to Red Deer and found out some crazy shit about my family that really put their Puritanism and their purity into a different context. And so because of that, I was like, why am I holding up this ridiculous standard when I'm lonely and, I'm in my early 20s and I was looking pretty good. Yeah. And I met this guy who was gorgeous. So we met and we were together for a while, and that was how I lost it. At that point I was like ready to.
Yeah, which is good. That's nice. That's a nice way to.
Yeah, except for I was working with like kind of like Youth for Christ on the military base. And this woman who was the boss, she pulled me aside and basically said, the Lord done spoke to me. And he told me that you need to stop sleeping with your boyfriend. That's what she said. So I did.
I was a Christian camp counselor, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
pretty
counselor.
good.
That's where a lot of my really, really good friends come from, or from being the other counselors, because we used to go to my friend's trailer and just, I don't know if this is okay, but we would drink and just like play Cards Against Humanity and stuff.
So fun.
Yeah, it was fun. That's how I know religion, right? But I remember one summer, so this is really hard to explain, but there's this like giant camp that brings like all the senior highs together all over North America, basically.
So fun.
And it's so much fun. And I worked at it when I was 21, 22, like after I had gotten my degree. And I remember, so I didn't really know how to dress for super hot weather, because like we're from Canada. Like if it's 30 plus degrees, like you're basically naked outside, because you don't know what like what to wear.
Yeah.
And I remember like I had this outfit where it was like a tank top with an open back and just like high-waisted shorts, which is like, I mean,
pretty normal.
It's probably, now that I look back on it, maybe it is like a bit scandalous to wear around high school boys, but I was like, it was hot.
Yeah.
You know, I was comfortable, like whatever.
Right.
And then one of the older counselors who, she was like, I don't know, like definitely a couple generations older than me. She pulled me aside and was like, this is really awkward, but like a bunch of staff at the camp like pulled me aside and were talking about how inappropriate your wardrobe is.
I'm sure.
A bunch of them had a fucking meeting about how I dress like a whore. And she was like, you know, you're a leader, you need to start acting like one. Like, this is not a good role model for the young woman. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, okay, well, I can put a sweater on. So I put one on, and it was one of those ones, it was from Aerie, and it has like little tiny holes in it, like, you know, those sweaters. She's like, yeah, I think that you should pick a different sweater. I was like, I'm done.
Oh my gosh, what did you do?
I texted my best friend, and I was so livid, and she was really upset for me, but I didn't do anything, and I kind of wish that I said something, but at the time I was so shocked that like someone well,
because you feel like maybe you're right. Like, if you're me, I'd think, oh yeah, maybe you're right, and I just can't see it. Like, you know, it takes a lot of like chutzpah to be able to be like, no, I stand for my shoulders, you know, or like I stand for my back. You know, like, it's tough when you're taught your whole life that, like, you know, if boys are being animals, that it's your fault, you know?
Yeah, and it was hard looking really young too, because I would get hit on a lot by teenagers, and I would have to explain to them that it's not okay, that like I'm the one who's in charge. And I don't know. I don't know. I just think that it made me uncomfortable, because instead of like teaching people not to over-sexualize my body, they were like, oh, you should probably just change all this stuff about yourself. So
I think that's a huge part of it. Like, that's a huge part of like women in the church are decorative. So it's like, then you get to a place where you've been taught your whole life that your body really isn't yours, and that your body is basically a weapon of the devil against men. That like, if you dress it a certain way, that you're sexualizing yourself in a way where you're culpable for their thoughts, which is amazing. Amazing to be like, okay, so little Jimmy over there is seeing your shoulders and he has an erection. Yeah. So put your shoulders away. And instead of being like, hey, Jim, get a hold of yourself.
Yeah, that's what a lot of interviews are coming up in my head right now. And there's a man that I interviewed who's actually like in his 60s, who is a Presbyterian minister, and he was saying that he feels like the church misses a super huge opportunity where it doesn't talk to people about sex, because they're going to learn it in one way or another.
Yes.
So you might as well teach it in a way that like emphasizes consent and kindness and respect and stuff. And I thought that was really beautiful coming from someone who is much older. Like him and a bunch of the younger people were saying that too, that if we don't teach it, if the church doesn't teach it, then someone else is going to, and it's going to be in a way that might be way more harmful to them.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
This will correlate to church that we're putting out on Sunday. So please wait for that one as we continue to explore kind of deconstructionism and how we can let go of the duality and be able to be our full selves and have a spiritual life. If you're into the content, please subscribe and ring the little bell and share it on your social. Thanks again, and thank you again.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Bye.